This is a very exciting part of the Agile mindset in education, where we get to take theory of Agile approach to the actual practice. An Agile mindset is the set of attitudes supporting an Agile working environment. These include respect, collaboration, improvement and learning cycles, pride in ownership, focus on delivering value, and the ability to adapt to change. Taking this mindset to the actual practice involves product owner that reviews and manages the product backlog. There's a sprint planning meeting and sprint backlog managing aspect of the flow. And then there is a sprint process, which often occurs in the duration of 1 to 4 weeks. And during this time, Scrum Master's role is to remove any barriers that might slow down the sprint process or that might get in the way of achieving the sprint goals. When you have a finished product after accomplishing all your sprint goals, there's a review process and there's a continuous improvement cycle where you review and improve to make it better. A Scrum project kicks off with the creation of a clear vision process. This product vision forms the foundation of the project. The product owner is responsible for the vision and communicating that out to the team so that everybody can be on the same page. When developing the product vision, you can use 5W model or some components of the 5W model, which are who, what, why, how, and when. So here is an example of how this model is utilized in creation of the product vision. Once you have formulated a clear vision, and when you try to execute this vision so that it comes alive, it is important that you go through some sort of prioritization. There are many techniques out there, Moscow being one of them. Moscow is a very popular prioritization technique for managing requirements. The method is commonly used to help key stakeholders understand the significance of initiatives in a specific release. In Moscow prioritization, M stands for must-have. These are non-negotiable product needs that are mandatory for the team. S stands for should have. These items are important initiatives that are not vital but add significant value to the project. C stands for could have. These are items that are nice to have that will have a smaller impact if they were left out. W stands for will not have. These are initiatives that are not a priority for this specific time frame. When you try to quantify the Moscow technique, must have is about 60% of the maximum total effort in comparison to should have, which are about 80% of the total effort. And when you get into could have, it's equivalent to maximum 100% of the total effort. In comparing traditional model to Agile model in terms of its requirement, traditional model focused on system operation in form of business and functional requirement, defines the purpose of guiding how exactly the team will build the functionality, focuses on all the details and getting a sign-off on the requirements. In the Agile approach, the requirement focuses on the intent of the user's need and written in a conversational user story format. It serves as a pointer for the team to develop something useful for the user in the best possible way at that time, keeping the definition of done in mind. Project manager and teams collaborate to finalize the scope, and together they revisit and enhance the functionality based on the end user feedback. During this process, it is important to think about the user and what their need is, as well as defining the value that can be delivered to the user. The definition of the user story is that they are compact description of business functionality. This tool forces team to identify the user and the business game for each functionality. And here's an example of how user stories can be written. As a who, I want what, so that why. Again, 5W models used in this example. When you try to add a value or define a value that's added in the project, you need to keep the user in mind, and it needs to be data-driven. What I mean by that is you cannot just assume that users might need XYZ. That XYZ must be defined by collection of some sort of data. One of the most common ways to uncover requirement is to interview different types of users. You could also use questionnaires. An advantage of using questionnaires is that information from a large group user can be obtained easily. In observation technique, observing a user of the application can help us get instant feedback about areas of improvement and uncover requirements that have been missed or ignored. You could also use a story writing workshop model, which is stakeholders write down as many stories as possible during a brainstorming session. The focus is to gather as many ideas or stories as possible. And later, these stories can be prioritized or redefined based on the customer's input. When you think about adding value, you need to keep both output and outcome in mind. Output may be something that you think of it instantly as you're thinking about the results accomplished through tasks. These can be the quantities of goods or services produced. Whereas outcome involves more processing of the output, and it is the impact or progress towards the ultimate goal or purpose. A new sprint starts immediately after the conclusion of the previous sprint. In the sprint planning process, there is an input from different stakeholders involved in the projects. Again, product owner manages the product backlog. And we also discuss what the constraint of the project may be and what the velocity and capacity of the project there may be. And during the sprint planning process, you discuss how you may resolve any constraints. Previously, we discussed using 5W models in the creation of the vision process. However, it can also be applied and used during sprint planning. As you're thinking about any constraint to the project and the product backlog, you might raise questions about why this is happening and how we may resolve them, and what is the actual problem that you need to think about resolving as a team. So the reason why we have sprint planning is to accomplish sprint goals better. The requirements of sprint goals consist of each sprint should have a goal. The entire team collectively agrees to the sprint goals by the end of the planning meeting. And during this process, usually team members can write things out on the board. During the planning meeting, the Scrum team commits to the sprint goals. So it is very important that the team is aligned during this process. And why sprint goals? The goal helps the team to collectively focus on one objective to achieve and not independently work on individual stories. The team can achieve the sprint goals without completing entire aspect of the project. Here is an example of task planning process on Scrum board, which also is very similar to Kanban board. You may post the user stories, and you might have categories divided into not started, in progress, and done. And the Scrum Master's role is to make sure that the flow is efficient and there is no buildup in one area versus the other. That's significant. As a Scrum team, you need to be very flexible and be agile. If the output of the sprint is going to be worthless to the organization due to some major changes in business rules or policies, you have to be ready for the sprint to be terminated, and you have to be willing to start a new sprint with new backlog. When it comes to creating a high-performing Scrum team, there are 3 steps to consider. You have to allow the team to fail and make sure that the team feels comfortable in admitting its failure in retrospective meeting. When the project or sprint goal fails, you have to find root cause of the failure and take necessary action. So what is root cause? When there is a failure, it is important that you ask why, not just at the surface level, but at least 5 levels deep, trying to find the root cause. If there is a failure in the sprint goal or during the sprint process or any part of the step throughout the project, it is important to remember that the failure is an event, not a person. It is also important to frequently assess if there is any potential failure or if the failure had just occurred rather than waiting until the last minute. The time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining.